By the time my aunt said it, the room was already loud. Too loud. The kind of loud that comes from forced celebration. Wine poured too fast, plates clattering, people talking over each other because silence feels dangerous. You were always the favorite. She said it smiling, laughing, even, as if she were sharing a harmless family joke. But when the words landed, everything inside me went still. I was standing near the end of the dining table, my back against the counter, a glass of water sweating into my palm. My Aunt Linda raised her wineglass slightly toward me, eyes bright, head tilted in mock admiration. You always were, she added. Grandma had such a soft spot for you. The laughter that followed was thin, delayed, courtesy laughter. The kind people give when they don't want to be part of whatever tension just walked into the room. I smiled automatically. I'd spent years perfecting that smile. The calm one. The polite one. The one that said I'm unbothered, nothing touches me, everything is fine. It was the same smile I wore at work meetings, school functions, and church luncheons. A smile that never revealed how my pulse had just jumped into my throat. Favorite. She didn't say it like a memory. She said it like an accusation. I felt my mother stiffen beside me before she spoke. I didn't even have to look at her. I could feel the change in her body, the way her shoulders squared just slightly, the way her breath paused mid-inhale. That's not fair, my mother said quietly. Linda waved her hand as if brushing away a fly. Oh, relax. I'm not bitter. I just think it's funny how things turn out, that's all. Funny. The word hung there, heavy and wrong. This dinner was supposed to be simple. A casual Sunday gathering. Pot roast, roasted vegetables, the good bread my cousin always brought. No speeches. No ceremonies. Just family trying to convince itself that life had returned to normal after my grandmother's death 3 months earlier. But nothing had been normal since the will. The trust. The lawyer's office. The number that still felt unreal when I thought about it. $310,000. In my name. Held in trust until my 40th birthday. Which was coming up in 8 weeks. I hadn't known about it. No one had. Not my mother. Not my cousins. And definitely not Linda. The lawyer had explained it carefully, like he was handling something fragile. Your grandmother established the trust when you were 12, he'd said. She added to it consistently over the years. Quietly. Quietly. That was my grandmother all over. She never talked about money. Never bragged. Never explained herself. She'd lived through too much to feel the need. Raised my mother alone after my grandfather died young. Worked 2 jobs. Saved everything. Reused envelopes. Cut coupons. And somehow still managed to build something solid by the end of her life. She left smaller inheritances to her other children and grandchildren. Sensible amounts. Fair amounts. But the trust, that was different. She believed you'd need it most, the lawyer had said. I hadn't known how to react. Gratitude felt inappropriate sitting next to my grieving mother. Shock felt selfish. Silence felt safest. Linda hadn't spoken at all that day. She'd smiled. Nodded. Taken notes. And 3 days later, she called me crying. At the dinner table now, months later, she swirled her wine and smiled like nothing had changed. My cousin changed the subject quickly. Someone asked about work. Someone else mentioned the weather. Plates were passed. The moment slid away. But the damage was done. Later, while I rinsed dishes at the sink, I felt her behind me before she spoke. You know, Linda said casually, your grandmother talked to me about money all the time. I paused, my hands still submerged in soapy water. Oh, I said. Yes. Toward the end, especially. I helped her with bills. Paperwork. She trusted me. I turned slightly, careful not to give her my full attention. I didn't know that. She smiled, leaning against the counter beside me. That's why I was surprised about the trust. I mean, weren't you? I dried my hands slowly, buying myself time. I was, I said evenly. She lowered her voice. Mistakes happen, Emily. Especially when people get older. Confusion. Misunderstandings. Paperwork errors. There it was. The shift. I've been thinking, she continued. It might be wise to review everything. Just to be sure it was all done properly. Review. Not understand. Not clarify. Review. I looked at her fully then. I'm sure the attorney handled it correctly, I said. Her smile tightened. Just a fraction. We'll see. That night, I lay awake replaying her tone. Her wording. The way she spoke as if the trust were unfinished business. As if it was something temporarily misplaced, waiting to be reclaimed. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that she had already tried to take it. Already tried to cash it. Already crossed a line she would never be able to step back over. At the time, all I knew was this. Something had changed. And whatever my aunt was smiling about at that table, it had nothing to do with the past. It was about what she thought she was still owed. The call came 3 days later. Tuesday morning. Ordinary. Forgettable. I was folding laundry in my bedroom, half listening to the news murmuring from the television, thinking about nothing more serious than whether I'd remember to defrost chicken for dinner. My phone buzzed on the dresser. An unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Hello. I said, tucking the phone between my shoulder and ear. Is this Emily Carter? A man asked. Yes. This is Mr. Howard from Beckett and Lowell. I'm calling regarding your grandmother's trust. My hands went still. A towel slipped from my grip and landed at my feet. Yes. I said again, slower this time. There's been an attempted transaction on the account, he continued. His voice was calm, practiced. An unauthorized request. The room felt suddenly too quiet. Even the television seemed to fade into the background. Attempted by who? I asked. There was a pause. Not hesitation. Consideration. Your aunt, Linda Carter, contacted our office claiming power of attorney and requested early disbursement of the trust funds. I sat down on the edge of the bed so abruptly the mattress creaked. I don't understand, I said. She doesn't have power of attorney. And my grandmother passed away. Yes, he replied. That's precisely why the request raised concerns. My mouth felt dry. She submitted documentation that appeared altered. Altered. Not confusing. Not unclear. Altered. We declined the request immediately and flagged the account, he continued. We're obligated to inform you. And to advise you to seek independent legal counsel. I stared at the far wall, my mind racing backward through every interaction with Linda over the last few months. The crying phone call. The questions. The comments about fairness. The word review spoken like a promise. Thank you for telling me, I said quietly. When I hung up, I stayed sitting there, phone still pressed to my ear, long after the call ended. My aunt hadn't been testing boundaries. She'd already decided they didn't apply to her. I called my mother next. She answered on the second ring. Hey, honey. She tried to take it, I said. A sharp intake of breath. Take what? The trust. She tried to access it. Forge paperwork. Silence. Then softly, she asked me something a few weeks ago. My stomach tightened. What kind of something? She wanted me to sign a form, my mother said. She said it was tax-related. Routine. I closed my eyes. What did you do? I said no, she replied. It didn't feel right. Relief flooded me, followed immediately by something colder. She was going to use you, I said. I know, my mother whispered. I think I always knew. We sat with that for a moment. 2 generations realizing the same truth at the same time. After we hung up, I called the attorney Mr. Howard recommended. Then another. And another. I scheduled consultations, took notes, asked questions I never thought I'd need to ask. What happens if a family member attempts fraud? What happens if they don't stop? What happens if this gets worse? By that evening, I wasn't shaking anymore. Fear had burned itself out and left something sharper behind. Clarity. Linda hadn't made a mistake. She'd made a choice. And choices have consequences. Over the next week, the messages started coming in. Voicemails framed as concern. I just don't want you being taken advantage of, Emily. Texts wrapped in guilt. Grandma wouldn't want lawyers involved. She wanted peace. Emails that danced carefully around threats. You don't want this to become something ugly. Each message felt like a test. A probe. An attempt to see how far she could push before I broke. I didn't respond. Silence became my shield. And that silence did something interesting. It made her louder. I heard things through cousins. Through old family friends. Through whispers passed along like warnings. Linda was saying I was being manipulated. That lawyers had convinced me to freeze the family out. That my grandmother hadn't been herself when the trust was created. That I'd pressured her. The last one hit hardest. Pressured. My grandmother, who once told a banker to stop explaining my own money to me like I'm a child. Pressured. The absurdity would have been laughable if it weren't so dangerous. Then came the letter. Certified mail. Formal. Polite. A request for mediation. She wanted to resolve the matter amicably. I read it twice. Then a third time. Amicably. That's when I realized something important. Linda wasn't escalating because she was confident. She was escalating because she was losing. And she knew it. What she didn't know, what she couldn't see yet, was that while she was busy rewriting the story out loud, I was finally starting to understand the one my grandmother had been writing quietly all along. The box arrived on a Thursday. No return address. No postage marks I recognized. Just my name written in careful, slanted cursive that made my chest tighten the second I saw it. My mother called me as soon as she found it on her porch. I think this is from your grandmother, she said softly, like saying it too loudly might break something. I drove over immediately. The box sat on the kitchen table, untouched. Neither of us wanted to open it first. It felt too intimate. Too deliberate. Like interrupting a conversation meant only for later. Finally, I slid my finger under the tape. Inside were 6 journals, stacked neatly, their covers worn but clean. Each one labeled with dates in my grandmother's handwriting. Alongside them was a sealed envelope and a small flash drive. I sat down on the floor, the box between my knees, and opened the letter. Emily, if you're reading this, then I was right to worry. I'm sorry for the weight I've placed on your shoulders, but I trusted you to carry it. My throat closed. She'd known. Some people believe love gives them leverage. They keep score. They don't see generosity as a gift but as a debt owed back to them. I never wanted you to learn that the hard way, but if you have, I want you protected. I wiped my eyes and kept reading. Everything is documented. Dates. Conversations. Intentions. If anyone questions my choices, this will answer them. My hands shook as I reached for the first journal. It began years earlier than I expected. Not at the end of her life, but long before. She'd started writing after a disagreement with Linda over money. A loan that was never repaid. A conversation that lingered longer than it should have. Each entry was meticulous. Linda asked again today if I'd considered adjusting my will. I told her no. She said she worries I don't understand the paperwork. Another entry, months later. She suggested I name her executor, just in case. I declined. She was displeased. The pattern was unmistakable. Charm. Persistence. Framing control as care. And then, me. Emily doesn't know about the trust yet. That's intentional. I don't want it to change her. I want it to protect her. Tears blurred the page. The journals didn't paint Linda as a villain. They didn't exaggerate or dramatize. They simply recorded. And that made them devastating. At the bottom of the box, I found the flash drive. It contained audio files, voicemails, recorded conversations. Linda's voice, confident and unguarded. Let's be practical, Mom. Emily doesn't need that kind of money. We can fix this later. She won't know the difference. I felt sick listening to them. My lawyer didn't. This is thorough, he said when I brought everything in. Your grandmother was very smart. Smart. Prepared. She'd known exactly how this might unfold. And she'd trusted me to finish it. The mediation date loomed. Linda continued her campaign, posting vague quotes online about betrayal, about greed, about how money reveals true character. Friends messaged me privately, unsure what to believe. I didn't explain. I didn't defend. I waited. Because now I wasn't just protected. I was informed. And information changes everything. The mediation was scheduled for a Monday morning. Neutral territory. Beige walls. Bottled water lined up like props. A long table designed to keep everyone just far enough apart to feel polite, not close enough to feel connected. Linda arrived early. I could tell because when I walked in with my lawyer, she was already seated, smoothing the sleeve of her suit like she was preparing for a performance. Beige, of course. Soft. Non-threatening. The color of reasonableness. She stood when she saw me. "Oh, Emily," she said, opening her arms slightly. "I'm so glad you came." I didn't step forward. My mother sat on the other side of the room, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the table. She hadn't wanted to be there. Linda had insisted. Family should witness reconciliation, she'd said. Reconciliation. The mediator entered, pleasant, professional, carrying a legal pad and a practiced smile. Introductions were made. Rules were explained. The air hummed with false calm. Linda spoke first. She always did. She talked about love. About concern. About how hard the last few months had been. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue she'd brought from home. "I just don't recognize my family anymore," she said softly. "I feel like I've been shut out." She looked at me when she said it. I said nothing. She went on about my grandmother. About how close they'd been. About how she'd helped manage things, toward the end. "I don't believe my mother intended to cause division," she said, voice trembling just enough. "I think she was confused. And I worry Emily is being encouraged to act against the spirit of what Mom wanted." The mediator nodded sympathetically. Then my lawyer spoke. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't interrupt. He simply slid a folder across the table. "Before we discuss feelings," he said calmly, "we need to discuss facts." He laid them out one by one. The trust documentation. The attempted unauthorized access. The altered paperwork. Linda's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Then came the journals. My grandmother's handwriting enlarged on printed pages. Dates highlighted. Quotes underlined. The room changed. The mediator leaned forward. Linda's expression froze. My lawyer pressed play on a small speaker. Linda's voice filled the room. Unfiltered. Confident. "She won't know the difference. I'll take care of it. We can fix this later." Silence followed. The kind that makes your ears ring. Linda stared at the table. Her face had gone pale, the beige of her suit suddenly too close to the color of her skin. This was taken out of context," she stammered. My lawyer didn't argue. He didn't need to. "This constitutes evidence of intent," he said, "including attempted fraud." The mediator cleared his throat. "I think we should take a short break," he said carefully. Linda didn't look at me then. She looked at my mother. And for a moment, just a moment, I saw something roar in her eyes. Not sadness. Fear. When the session resumed, Linda's tone had changed. No more tears. No more speeches. She spoke quietly, carefully. "I'm willing to withdraw my claims," she said. "If we can agree to move forward peacefully." Move forward. My lawyer nodded. That would be wise. 2 weeks later, the paperwork was filed. All claims withdrawn. No further action. No apology. Just silence. The trust remained untouched. And Linda disappeared from my life as abruptly as she'd once tried to control it. My 40th birthday arrived quietly. No party. No big dinner. Just a cake from the bakery down the street and a single candle my daughter insisted on lighting herself. I made a wish I didn't say out loud, the kind that doesn't feel safe to share yet. The trust matured at 9 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee I'd already reheated twice. My phone buzzed. An email notification from the bank. Trust disbursement completed. $310,000. Seeing the number in my own account felt unreal. Not because it was large, though it was, but because of everything it represented. Years of quiet intention. Months of conflict. Generations of tension compressed into a single line of text. I didn't feel excited. I felt heavy. As if my grandmother had finally handed me something she'd been holding for a long time and said, "Your turn." I paid off my mortgage first. I stared at the confirmation screen for a long time after submitting the payment, waiting for some dramatic rush of relief. It didn't come. What came instead was calm. A deep, unfamiliar calm. I set aside money for my daughter's future. Not extravagantly. Just securely. Enough that she wouldn't have to make choices out of fear one day. I donated to the public library my grandmother volunteered at for nearly 20 years. No plaque. No announcement. Just a quiet gift, like she would have wanted. The rest I invested carefully, conservatively. I wasn't interested in proving anything to anyone. Especially not Linda. Word traveled anyway. Money always does. Some family members reached out again, cautiously, as if testing whether I'd changed. Some apologized. I didn't know what to believe, they said. I told them I understood. And I did. Others stayed silent. Linda remained absent. She didn't attend holidays anymore. Didn't show up to birthdays. Didn't call my mother. At first, that absence felt like a wound. Then it felt like relief. No more comments. No more veiled accusations. No more walking into rooms braced for tension. One afternoon, months later, I ran into her at the grocery store. By accident. We passed each other near the produce section. She looked thinner. Tired. Older in a way that had nothing to do with age. She froze when she saw me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she nodded once. Tight. Controlled. Emily. Linda. That was it. She walked away. And I realized something then that surprised me. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. Families don't explode all at once. They fracture quietly. Over years. Over conversations that never quite heal. Over resentments no one names directly. Linda had always been that fracture. People knew it. They just didn't want to admit it. After everything settled, my cousin called me one evening. "I should have believed you," she said. "You didn't have enough information," I replied. "No," she said. "I didn't want enough information." That honesty mattered. Others never said anything at all. They smiled politely at gatherings. Asked about my daughter. Avoided the subject of money like it might combust if spoken aloud. I learned who could sit with truth. And who preferred comfort. My mother changed, too. She grew lighter. less careful with her words. One night, we sat on her porch watching the sun dip behind the trees, and she said, "I think your mother knew exactly what she was doing." I nodded. "She wasn't choosing favorites," my mother continued. "She was choosing who needed protection." That was the moment it fully clicked. The trust had never been a reward. It was a shield. Linda hadn't lost something that was hers. She'd been stopped from taking something she believed she deserved. And that distinction mattered. I started speaking differently after that. More directly. More honestly. I stopped apologizing for boundaries. Stopped explaining decisions that didn't require consensus. The ripple effects surprised me. At work, I stopped overextending myself. In friendships, I stopped accepting guilt disguised as obligation. It wasn't the money that changed me. It was the experience of standing firm while someone tried to rewrite reality around me. That kind of clarity stays with you. I visit my grandmother's grave once a month. Not out of duty. Out of conversation. I bring tea in a thermos and pour a little onto the grass, the way she used to do when a cup cracked unexpectedly in her hands. "No sense crying over what can't hold anymore," she'd say. I talked to her about my daughter. About work. About the garden she never got to see finished. And sometimes, about Linda. Not with bitterness. With understanding. "She tried," I tell her quietly. "But you knew she would." The wind moves through the trees, and I imagine my grandmother smiling that small, knowing smile of hers. People still say it sometimes. "You were always the favorite." I don't correct them. Because now I understand. Being the favorite didn't mean I was loved more. It meant I was trusted more. Trusted to handle the truth. Trusted to carry the weight. Trusted to stand when someone tried to take what wasn't theirs. And that trust changed everything. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.